Hi, I'm Seth Shockley.
And I'm Kayla Gonzalez.
We're here today with Channel 4.5 News. We're going to talk to you today about the judicial branch.
The branch of government charged with the interpretation of laws and administration of justice. This also includes the Supreme Court. One of the most important figures in the judicial branch are lawyers. We have recently got in contact with one, so that way we could see firsthand what they think of the judicial branch. The following is an interview.
What can you tell me that goes on in a courtroom?
Well, there's lots of things that goes on in a courtroom. It all depends on what type of case you're dealing with. There's several different types of court. There's a district court, and then there's a circuit court, then there's your court of appeals, and ultimately your Supreme Court. In district court, that handles different types of cases. There's a criminal side and then a civil side. Criminal is a fairly familiar term. Obviously, if you break the law, you will be charged with a crime, and then you have to go to court. Civil may not be as easy to understand. Civil litigation is when someone has some sort of a grievance against somebody. Let's say that they, you might have seen, I'm sure you've seen commercials on television for personal injury lawyers. So if you're injured on someone's property, that would be a civil type of case. Collections, if somebody owes you money and they've not paid that money and you wanted to sue to collect that, that would be a civil case. Now in district court on the criminal side handles violations, which would be a traffic ticket, and then up through what we call a misdemeanor. A misdemeanor is when someone breaks the law and the crime that they've committed is punishable by up to 1 year in jail. So that's your limits on your district court and the criminal side. On the civil side, in district court, that's we sometimes refer to it as a lower court, but it's really not, shouldn't be taken as a lower court. That can be somewhat demeaning to the district court, but they handle lower level cases. On the civil side of it, you have small claims, which is up to $2,000, and then you have your regular civil, which is up to $5,000 claim. So if somebody owes you anywhere from $1, I'm sure nobody would sue on $1, but just to set the limits here, up to $5,000, you would be in district court.
Yeah, because I've seen TV shows where they sue from $50 to $10 or the max you said.
Right.
My second question is, how long have you been in the field of a lawyer?
This will be my 5th year in May.
Okay, and have you always worked here in Bowling Green?
I have. I was born and raised here in Bowling Green, and after law school I wanted to come back here and practice.
What kind of role do you play in the judicial branch, do you feel like?
I am a private attorney. I don't work for any state agency or anything like that. So my clients are very much like customers of any business. They find me in the Yellow Pages or online now. That's the main place people find services. But I am a privately hired lawyer, and what I do is if someone is charged with a crime, they come to me and we discuss the issues and go to court, whatever we have to do to get that case resolved. Or if someone's needing a divorce or say child custody, those are all things that I deal with as a privately hired lawyer. Occasionally I represent children who've been abused or neglected. State law provides that if a child is being abused or neglected and it goes to court, the court has to appoint an attorney to represent that child. It's called a guardian ad litem. And so I do that kind of work quite a bit. I do some civil litigation, not an entirely large amount, but I do some civil litigation, and I do probate work. I haven't got to that yet. Probate is when someone passes away. They have business that has to be finished up, and that would be paying the debts of the estate or dividing up the assets among the heirs. So I do that type of work as well. As far as a role, I'm sure you've all heard of the Bill of Rights.
Yeah.
You've heard of the Constitution and the federal law, state law. All of those are designed to control the government and how it deals with the people and the citizens. I guess the best thing that I could say to you is I've had people ask me in the past, how can you stand to represent criminals? And my answer is simply that they're not criminals until they're found guilty. In this country, you are innocent until proven guilty. Everybody has a right to have their day in court and a right to a jury trial if they so choose. So my job and my role as a privately hired defense lawyer is to protect their rights and make sure that the law is properly applied.
Okay, do you like the field you're in? Would you recommend being a lawyer to anyone else?
I would. It's a long. When I first started, I was introduced to another attorney who'd been practicing a while, and I think he put it best. It's a long apprenticeship. It takes a long time. You have to have a 4-year degree from college. You have to go to college. I went to Western Kentucky University, and then you have to go on to law school, which is a 3-year program. So if you went straight through, traditionally, it would be a 4-year and then another 3, so 7 years total. When you graduate law school, if you want to be a practicing attorney, you have to sit for the bar exam. The bar exam is a 2-day exam that's given either in Frankfurt or Louisville, depending on when you take it. It has a written portion and then a multiple choice. You have to pass that before you can get your license and actually practice law.
In the eyes of a lawyer, what does the judicial branch mean to you?
Well, the judicial branch, the job of the judicial branch is to make sure that your rights are protected. You've got the legislative branch, which is to pass law, and the executive branch is to enforce law. Executive branch entails the police, all of the federal agencies like FBI and people like that. The role of the judicial system is to take what has been done, what charges have been brought, or what laws have been passed, and make sure that they are constitutional. The Supreme Court are appointed by the president, nominated by the president, and approved by the Senate, and they serve life terms until they want to either retire or they pass away. And the purpose of that is so they don't have to play politics, basically. Their number one role is not to please anybody, but to make sure that the Constitution is followed. So that trickles on down to the lowest levels of the judicial system. We make legal arguments as far as civil rights all the time. It's a very common
And
thing.
it went to Supreme Court because she didn't give them permission to check her bag. Have you ever heard of that case? Do you have any thought on that?
I've never heard of that particular case, but that's a very common theme. Search and seizure
Yes.
is you have rights that protect you from unlawful search and seizure, and if the courts, if a person, let's say, is driving their car and they're stopped for a traffic violation, oftentimes the police will ask the driver if they would mind if they search their vehicle. You do not have to consent to that search. The only way that a police officer can forcibly search your vehicle against your wishes is to, they have to what we call articulate, meaning basically tell a judge
Search
what
warrant,
their
yeah.
probable cause is. The probable cause that a crime is being committed gives a judge the power to issue a search warrant. And at that time, they can search your vehicle whether you consent to it or not. In the case that you're referencing, it would be my thoughts that they did not obtain any type of a search warrant. When you get into on a school premises, there becomes a bit more of a
Harm to others thing.
yes, and it's a little bit harder to say whether or not they had the right to search because it's on school premises. Depends on the protection of search and seizure extends to students in school, but it also depends on the circumstances surrounding why they searched. Without knowing what gave them the reasoning to search the girl, I don't know if it was a backpack or whatever she's.
It was a purse, but yeah.
So for what I've taken from what you've told me about the case, it sounds to me like they violated her civil rights by not getting a search warrant.
Yeah,
before
we learned
searching.
about it in our KWA government class. If you've heard of KWA, probably, but we learned about it. She she had her purse, but she took it to Supreme Court, and they said that New Jersey won, and that they had every right to check her purse because it was on school property and it could have been a danger to school. And they did find something in her purse, and we were just making sure if you've heard of the case. And
Yeah. So do you think that the Supreme Court was right?
That because it was on school property, they can search.
Mhm.
Personally, without having read the case, if I had read the case and could have seen all the details, I'd have a much more educated opinion. As a defense attorney, we are somewhat we lean a little bit more towards
the person.
than the government agency. So honestly, I don't think that a person should be subject to just any kind of search. I feel like that's one of the things that makes us free as a society, is to be free from that type of thing. You shouldn't have to worry that you're going to be searched or you have your privacy invaded on somebody's whim. There needs to be more than that in order to invade that private space, and that's my opinion. Again, without having read the case first, there may be more there than what I know, but that typically, like I said, I lean more towards restricting the government agency. In the end, what we can't allow to happen, which we've seen a lot of it happen after September 11th, 2001. I'm not sure how old you guys are, but you probably don't remember that. I don't know. It's been several years ago.
No, I was one.
Okay.
But we know what it is.
Okay. Well, after that happened, there was quite a bit of law that was passed that really interfered, I felt like, with our civil liberties. And although I understand that there was a danger that had to be addressed, we can't allow that. It's somewhat likened to the thing where if you're afraid of your safety, lock yourself in a box. Well, nobody wants to do that, because what's the point at that point? So what I'm saying is that liberty, I think Ben Franklin said it best: those who trade liberty for security deserve neither.
We told him about the Marbury versus Madison case. This is what he had to say.
When a government agency refuses to do a job that has been handed to them, a person can sue or actually go to the Supreme Court. I believe go directly to the Supreme Court to get what we call a writ of mandamus, which would mean that the Supreme Court would order that agency to do its duty of whatever it might be. Now, I'm not sure if that's exactly what's going on in this case or not. Could you give me that one more time, make sure I've understood it properly?
Today, on the sports segment, we have Marbury versus Madison. At the very end of his term, President John Adams had finally made many federal appointments, including William Marbury as Justice of the Peace and District of Columbia. Thomas Jefferson, the new president, refused to recognize the appointment of Marbury. The normal practice of making such appointments was to deliver a commission, or notice of appointment. This was normally done by the Secretary of State. Jefferson's Secretary of State at the time was James Madison. At the direction of Jefferson, Madison refused to deliver Marbury's commission. Marbury sued Madison, and Supreme Court took the case. Chief Justice John Marshall wrote that the Judiciary Act of 1789, which spelled out practice of delivering such commissions for judges and justices of peace, was unconstitutional because it gave the Supreme Court authority that was denied by Article 3 of the Constitution. Thus, the Supreme Court said the Judiciary Act of 1789 was illegal and not to be followed.
In this case, established judicial review. So we were just wanting to know how that case word established judicial review has an impact on today's world and today's government.
Okay. Well, judicial review, if you, I'm trying to think of a current event that happened where let's take the Affordable Care Act. I'm sure everybody's heard about Obamacare, as it is. Whenever that law was passed, it was brought to the Supreme Court ultimately to determine whether or not it was constitutional. One of the major parts of that law that was considered unconstitutional by many was the ability of the government to penalize somebody for not purchasing an insurance policy. The government, federal government, has the power, it's written in the Constitution, to levy taxes. And the Supreme Court has to look at and scrutinize the law and look at every possible way they can find to make it legal. Basically saying that if there's any possible interpretation of this law that makes it legal, that's what we have to do. They're very restricted. And in that sense, the Supreme Court stated, well, this is not a penalty because the federal government really doesn't have a power to penalize somebody for not purchasing a product. It's a tax. And so by it being a tax, the federal government does actually have the power to do so. So that would be an example of judicial review where an action is taken by a government agency and the Supreme Court had the power to review that and determine whether or not it was proper. Another case may be an executive decision that the president makes. I think it was Truman, I believe, President Truman, that committed troops without the approval of Congress, and that went to the Supreme Court whether or not he had the power to do that. So there are different examples throughout history of a government figure or Congress or whatever doing something and having it reviewed by the Supreme Court. So it all ties together. That's why we have a three-party system or branches of government. It's checks and balances. I'm sure you all have heard of that and studied that. Each group, each branch has a check on the other.
So they don't get overpowered.
Right, that's exactly right. You can imagine when our country was founded, one of the things that they were trying to do was get away from a central power, a monarchy, so that's what they did by having the three branches of government. That each one would keep a check on the other so that nobody had too much power.
Before we go, we'd like to let you all know about the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court heads the judicial branch of the United States government. It is the only court established by the Constitution. Decisions made by the Supreme Court are usually of national importance. Equal justice under law is the motto of the Supreme Court. The wording of the Constitution is complex, so it must be studied and examined carefully. When the questions concerning particular laws arise in lower courts, the justice who makes up the Supreme Court are responsible for explaining and interpreting the Constitution. All of the other courts in the United States must follow the ruling of the decision made by the justices of the Supreme Court. The Constitution also gives the Supreme Court the power to judge whether federal, state, and local governments are acting within law. The Supreme Court can also decide if a president's action is unconstitutional. The decisions of the Supreme Court are absolute and final. In contrast, the decisions and judgments reached in lower courts may be appealed or questioned. Thousands of requests or rulings reach the Supreme Court each year. Fewer than 150 are actually considered upon ruling. Thank you. And now to bring us out, back to Kayla and Seth.
Hi, I'm Kayla Gonzalez.
And I'm Seth Shockley. And this was the Judicial Branch, a special news report. We're out.